Welcome all of you. Thank you all for coming. It's a unique and special evening and a day here at Harvard. We have a very honored guest who's bringing us a kind of insight that's rare and difficult to get. Senator Sherry Rehman, here with James Stock. I'll introduce both of them in a minute. I just want to say I'm Hitesh Hathi. I'm with the Mittal Institute at Harvard. And we are doing this in partnership with the Salata Institute and also the Center for International Development. I want to thank both of them for helping us put this together. I see Asim is here from the CID, and of course, James Stock, whom I'll introduce in a minute. And just for a moment to tell you, for those of you who don't know about the three institutes, the Mittal Institute, we engage in interdisciplinary research to advance and deepen the understanding of critical issues for South Asia and for the rest of the world. The Center for International Development works to build, convene, and deploy talent to address the world's most pressing challenges. And the Salata Institute, its mission is to develop and promote durable, effective, and equitable solutions to climate change challenges confronting humanity. So that's a very brief about those three institutions. If you don't know them, please find out more about them and join us in this work we're doing. I say this is a unique moment because we're all facing an existential crisis. I can tell you about some of what's going on in the world, but I think it's in the headlines enough that you all know. The point is, what do we do about it? How do we pay the right kind of attention? And that's why we're here today, to hear from someone who has learned how to do that. I don't want to take too much time to give you a preview, so I'll just turn to introduce both of our distinguished speakers. And actually, Senator Rehman, with your permission, maybe I'll introduce Jim first. So James Stock is Harvard's Vice Provost for Climate and Sustainability. He's the director of the Salata Institute for Climate and Sustainability at Harvard. He's a professor in the economics department and at the Kennedy School. His current research includes energy and environmental economics with a focus on fuels, US climate policy, and macroeconomics. He's also served as a member of President Obama's Council of Economic Advisors. His portfolio there included macroeconomics and energy and environmental policy. He's as every undergraduate who's here knows, he's the co-author of a leading textbook on econometrics. He holds a PhD in economics and an MA in statistics from the University of California at Berkeley. So now that you've heard that, you know they find people like me to introduce these extraordinary people, because I look at these and wonder, what have I done with my life? And nothing particularly useful. So if that wasn't daunting enough, let me daunt you some more. As I was also preparing to introduce Sherry Rehman, I was thinking it's almost even impossible to know which title to use for her. You know, you could say ambassador. She served as ambassador to the US. She's had multiple diplomatic posts, including at the UN. She's a member of the Global Futures Council at the World Economic Forum. You could say minister. She has served in a number of high posts in the cabinet in Pakistan. And as I think most of you know, most recently, she was the Federal Minister for Climate Change. She's currently a senator, a fourth-term parliamentarian. She's the first woman opposition leader in Pakistan's Senate. She's the chair of the Senate's Climate and Environmental Caucus. She's also, and Pakistanis will know this, or actually everyone in South Asia knows this, she is a long-time civil society activist. She has received Pakistan's highest civilian award, Nishan-e-Imtiaz. So all of that, going off script, will explain to you why Time magazine has picked her as one of the 100 most influential people in the world today. So particularly lucky to have her. I'm sorry to embarrass you. I'm almost done. Particularly dear to my heart since I was a journalist for a long time. She's a very noted journalist and editor. I won't go into some of the extraordinary work she's done there. She's also a thinker. She's the founding chair of the Jinnah Institute, which is a leading think tank in Pakistan and an institute with which we hope to have a partnership. She's also an author. Her latest book is Womansplaining, which looks at modernity, politics, and activism in Pakistan through the prism of 22 women activists, leaders, and academics, allowing them to speak in their own voice. Well, please join me in welcoming both of these speakers. If you'll come up. So, just a little housekeeping. We'll begin with a few words from Senator Rehman, and then we'll just have a fireside chat with the two of them, and then turn naturally to questions from the audience. And what I want to say is sort of what I've been thinking about all day. There's so many things about Pakistan we could talk about. Everything from the extraordinary re-efflorescence of miniature painting in the Mughal style to all the problems we hear about. There are many wonderful positive things, and there are many difficult and terrible things, as is true for all over the world. But today we have a unique opportunity to focus on the climate crisis in Pakistan and listen and hear and converse with someone who's at the front line. So we'll stay focused on climate. Thank you.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me? It's an odd mic, but thank you so much, Hitesh, for that very generous and embarrassing introduction. Yes, it has been a busy life. But I just want to say for 1 minute that first I want to thank you for your hospitality, Mittal Institute, Salata Institute, and Center for International Development. You know, I've been to New England many times before, and what struck me as extraordinary, and I have a confession to make, I immediately agreed. I love fall in New England. I came here 40 years ago. I'm dating myself, okay. To go to school at Smith College, the woods. And it used to be very, very cold. We were suited up in thermals in any day of October. The trees were a beautiful flame red. It's the same here. Well, it's October now. And I kept saying to Hitesh, I said, what is wrong? He's like, why? I said, it's hot in the day. It's not just balmy, it's actually hot. Nothing compared to what I'm coming from. But I said, well, this is climate change. And he said, yeah, shrugged, okay. It's climate change. Fine. Your seasons are going rogue, like ours. We did not have for 2 years any spring. It's just been swallowed up. We go from winter to summer directly, and ferocious summers, right? And in seeing that, I'm noting that, you know, climate change is happening here too, in front of our eyes, under our feet. Okay, this is now sounding better. So what do I do? Stay this way. And here I've noticed it's not catastrophic. Thank God for that. It's not catastrophic. It hasn't come. Disaster hasn't come calling to your doorstep. Well, don't mistake that. Don't be complacent. Don't not think about climate change as if it's very far away in the future. Don't think of it like that. It's not far away in the future. It's accelerating everywhere. You saw New York. And the one way we kind of push it away cognitively, disconnect from it, I think that's deliberate, we all do it, is that it's elsewhere. Climate change is taking place elsewhere. The catastrophe is not at our doorstep, and it's not coming here, and we're safe. Well, I hope that happens. I am from that elsewhere. And I am happy to talk about what goes on in many of the elsewheres where we thought none of this would catch up with us, specifically because, well, you know, we've been reading and hearing and talking. We're not big emitters, we're fractional emitters. So why would it happen to us? Oh, we can talk about that. I can carry this on, but I was told to speak for 1 minute and then hand this over to you. So you can ask why and what and how, if you like.
Thanks very much, Senator. It's just a delight to have you here, and it's a real privilege for us to be able to have this conversation with you. Let me just do one little piece of housekeeping. The logistics here are such that some of the folks over there might not have a very good view. You are invited to take some of these mini seats over here if you want to get a better view. So if it's feel free to just come on over here. and we'll be able to all see each other and then talk a little bit better. And in terms of the conversation, we're looking forward to the senator and I will have a conversation for a while, and then we're going to transition and have some questions and discussions from the audience. And we look forward to your participation. And thanks for moving over. This is just a lot cozier. This is terrific. You know, Senator, you started talking about the weather here in Massachusetts, yes, which is a little bit weird, but I must say that one of the weather events that is top of mind, not just, of course, for you, but top of mind for many in the international community, catastrophic flooding occurred in Pakistan in 2022. Now, you were Minister for Climate Change during that period, which, can you talk a little bit, just provide us some information about how that transpired, what your role in that was, and then I'd be interested in some, further possibility. Yeah.
I think from what I've seen all day in multiple events that they've kept me busy in, which is why I'm losing my voice now, is that I think people know what happened in Pakistan. It's not a community that isn't aware. Surprise, surprise. But so I won't really go into the scale and fury of what we endured in terms of climate carnage, but we weren't prepared for it, certainly not at all. And we had started noting that there was an overheating of the summer. And 2022 and even 2021, I noticed it was 50.7, something like that, degrees or more. That's something like 128 Fahrenheit. So we were the hottest place on the planet 3 years running. All of this was in the south of Pakistan, a city called Jacobabad 1 year, another called Dadu another year, and a third called Turbat the other year. And they were often competing for, I mean, you could literally fry an egg on the pavement if you land there at an airport. So, I mean, we were noticing this, that it was affecting and impacting crops. It was obviously impacting human health and people working outside the homes, farm workers unable to make a living. Generally, even children in school, it gets very hot. It is not fit for human life. This is what I call the red planet. And it's on the heat map, it's red. So you're still green. But here's what's happening. We thought, okay, the bad summer, it's going to go away. Climate change was not a big conversation in Pakistan, okay? It was mostly the environment and, yes, our forest covers down, grow some trees, but the ministry I walked into was climate change. And I looked at it and I said, we've got to understand the context here. Obviously, this is, cascading heat waves. We started running task forces with the provinces to engage them and to see what they're doing. Anyway, we started seeing forest fires the same year. And I noticed this today. I mentioned it to someone at the Mittal Institute that India experienced. So 14 people died yesterday in what is known weirdly as a GLOF event, glacial lake outburst flood. That this is particular to mountain areas, and we share several mountain ranges with India. And I looked at it and I thought, well, we could have shared our experience because we built a huge early warning system. And so this is something we should talk about. But the GLOF events, I mean, I'd just taken over and there were these 70 GLOF events. And they're not huge floods, but what happens is that they come down with such scale and ferocity and volume of water. They last about 2 days maximum. But in that time, they ripped everything on the way apart. There is no question of surviving that. And something like a bridge, a big hydro plant, anything, energy, everything goes. So we've learned to save lives. In those 70 GLOF events, we did not lose any lives. We had the early warning system in place. It's low cost. And really, I would be happy to share with Nepal and India how we're doing that, because this is important. It's only going to multiply. Those glacial outburst events are happening because the glaciers are melting at 300%, their average of the decade. And I didn't even know we had the largest number of glaciers, big and small, outside the polar region. So look at this terrain, mountain to delta. There's a delta in stress, complete stress in drought, the cracked earth pictures all over the newspapers. You're looking at them and it's like, oh my God, we're going to be water scarce by 2025. That's a thing. That's a real thing. And then the mountains are cascading with these flash floods. So Islamabad has beautiful forests burning up. So you've got the capital with these forest fires. Balochistan burning up as junipers, everybody. So I said, forest fires, this can't get any worse. And then comes that flood. There was no river flood. The issue is that we were all set. We know how to deal with a riverine flood. We've had hydromet disasters for years and years and years. 2010 was a huge flood. This one was from the sky. Now, South Asia, all of South Asia knows about monsoons, from Bangladesh to Pakistan. And in the middle, of course, India. In fact, most of our poetry, films, pop culture built around romanticizing the monsoon. So it was never meant to be vicious or a killer or be as destructive as it has recently become. And this was a killer monsoon. It just wouldn't stop. And you could see people sending videos, and I'm standing there with the helis. The Air Force is not able to take them up. How do we rescue people? Search and rescue is always done by helicopters everywhere in the world. And we set up a huge disaster response system. So our helis were just not taking off. And you'd get into the thing and they'd come out. Then we had the Navy inland in ways that I've never seen or imagined. Okay, I'm not saying big ships, but boats flying all over terrain that was not supposed to be inundated. So 1/3 of the country was inundated. Many of you know this. That number occurred when I saw the districts. I said, how many are there? This is 1/3 of the country. That's huge. When 33 million people were impacted, that's when we called in the UN, and they were down on the ground, the OCHA and everybody, because it was going to be not just a humanitarian disaster. You could see the health crises looming, the women, I don't know how many, over 100,000 pregnant women giving birth on roads, without shelter, not able to reach clinic because those clinics were gone. They were just underwater. So there was this 1/3 of the country and the south of the country literally inundated. The highways all gone, everything flat. It was like a biblical flood. And I said, okay, this is really bad. We've got to call in the UN. We did. Mr. Antonio Guterres, the Secretary General, was remarkable. He comes in and he said, I've never seen anything like it. UN OCHA says we've been to every disaster in the world. We have never seen anything like it. I said, well, Excellency, we are the ground zero now of climate change. This is global warming at its best. It can only get worse. Okay, we'll have a few summers, but now we were not prepared for this level of change and stress and catastrophe. So he said, yes, this is carnage. And, from then onwards, it was like something like 3 to 4 months of just, we never made it to the rehab stage, which happens very quickly. We were just getting people out into tents. And more tents and more tents. 33 million people, just for perspective, the size of 3 mid-sized European countries. And we were dealing with that pretty much for the whole year. I don't think at least the 6 core ministers dealing with it, I don't think we slept for a month. Whether you're on the road or not, whether you're in our disaster management spell. So what the country learned, reeling from shock, was that we need better warning systems. we had them for the glaciers. We did not have this for this kind of monsoon. We'd never seen it. I'd already applied for a huge World Bank grant for this. It didn't come in as a grant, and I'm telling you all this because there is an external financing, or climate financing piece to this. That is a chokehold on building resilience, adaptation, and going forward with our mitigation plans. The grant came in, it was $60 million. Oh, you're a star. So thank you. So we looked at it, and the next day I had to repurpose it. I'd nearly wept. I got a note from the Prime Minister. Minister, all climate funds are going for what? For something known as our social protection program called the Benazir Income Support Program. It is the gold standard in social protection. Quite proud of that. It only goes to women householders, so they become more empowered within their communities and their families. So we had to put all the money ever available for anything, repurpose for just getting cash to their tents. There was no doorstep, there were just tents, and people needed cash. The months had passed, they needed to be whole again, or to understand that their futures would be returned to them. And the lesson that we learned was that if, at least I was communicating it, is that if you're not intentional about climate change, if you're not intentional about building resilience or meeting your carbon neutrality goals, whichever is a priority depending on the country, you're not going to get anywhere. There is no default that we all imagine. Nature is not going back to a default setting. That is very clear. We may have a better summer, but even look at New England. What happened to the fall? It's fine right now. It's not threatening you. And I hope it never does. But what I also learned is that hope is not a plan. So you start making plans. You start building up your defenses, your shields. But the truth of the matter is there's very little science yet that is collected in one place where you can resource and say, okay, how do we build guardrails against this kind of climate flooding from the sky? We don't know that yet. We spoke to the Danes. They were right there with their teams. They have the most experience with water disasters. And they came in with, they saw what was happening and they said, okay, we also having trouble with this one. So we're still working through solutions. Some of them are creative. Some of them still don't have answers, which is why I actually came here. I think we need, because I hate travel, but I think we need to connect with each other. The whole year, 16 months, we've been doing that at the UN, everywhere, at Geneva, and at Sharm el-Sheikh, at the COP27, the Conference of Parties, is the one place that still holds out some hope for us all of us coming to a collective solution. So far, the politics of the world, of climate change, of division, is taking precedence over collective answers. And at COP27, the other lesson learned was, and I did want to broadcast this, was that I put it on the slogan of the pavilion. The Pakistan pavilion said, what went on in Pakistan will not stay in Pakistan. Climate change knows no borders. It is accelerating much faster than we imagined or planned for. We should have planned for better. You know why? Because the warming trajectories are all off. And this is the inaction that I was speaking to you earlier about. I'm giving you a segue. Or should I keep speaking?
No, that's great. Actually, I'd like to follow up. There's a lot to follow up on, but I'd like to follow up on just one of the challenges. You talked about how it's important to be intentional and how it's important to have plans for the future in place and how you need to be thinking about building in resilience. Those sorts of issues are actually quite challenging to pull off in practice. So a practical question, certainly at a lesser scale, but still important here in the United States is when we have hurricanes sweep through and there's a great deal of destruction, there's a question of how would we rebuild and where should we rebuild? Some places are not appropriate to rebuild in. Some places, if you do build in them, there needs to be much better resilience, houses on stilts or things like that. I'd imagine that those sorts of changes, where are you going to rebuild, could be super challenging, very challenging in Pakistan because there's lots of individuals who are displaced. They need to have some way to have their livelihood and they need to have homes. But perhaps one lesson from this is that there's more vulnerability in some of these areas that are potentially prone to flooding than we might have recognized. And going forward, that vulnerability is only going to increase. So how do you deal with this recognition that there's going to be increasing vulnerability in some of these areas going forward, confronting that with the widespread need for housing and rebuilding that's actually going on at the moment?
So snatching opportunity from this challenge, here's what we did in the province of Sindh is the one that was the most impacted, literally, and which is where I'm from. It's the Delta region. It's already very stressed. It's desalinated to a huge degree. The aquifers are depleting very fast, which is the groundwater. So what we had done before the flood was already launched something called the Living Indus Initiative. I should have made a presentation separately to the Center of International Development. I'm going to do that on Zoom, if I may, on this Living Indus initiative. And what this does is it presents itself as an axis of adaptation because the river, the Indus River, is literally the jugular vein that runs through Pakistan. About 90% of livelihoods, productivities, directly or indirectly related to it. It is one of the most, it houses the largest man-made irrigation system in the world. And it is really quite an extraordinary river because it has been mythologized as the mother of Pakistan and the name Indus Valley Civilization is it is also a transboundary river, as you know. So we were looking at the river part of it in Pakistan and finding creative, small, medium, and large, long-term solutions to it, hoping to attract private investment on a menu of 25 options. We've really been excited to design that because it will recharge the river, which has been badly in need. So this is a big, huge adaptation initiative before this flood took place. After that, I was like, no. We also need a national adaptation plan, which was very, very long overdue. So instead of waiting for the consultants to come in, that's the norm in our countries. The foreign consultants come in and take 5 years to write the document, take 3 more to haggle over the money, whatever. We did it, and I've got it with me. And it's not perfect. It's a work in progress. It's a medium-term document. It addresses, or it begins to address, it puts us on that journey as to how we will build the guardrails, who will live where, all of that. And in doing so, we found, for instance, we have to ask the province of Sindh, you tell us where, you tell the federal government, which is me, how this works, where are you going to find the land? Do you need our help? Obviously they do. So the solutions they found is from whatever pool of money, which we all haggled over, because when there is a finite resource, then it's finite and everybody wants a piece of that. And that was a big chokehold money, and the World Bank stepped in. All of it is still loans. It's concessional financing maybe, but it needed to be at this stage, which it isn't. And so Sindh started building. You can't persuade people to live away from embankments that they've lived, oh my God, for centuries, and they don't want to leave. They still want to go back to what they perceive as their ancestral home. They feel they have a right to it. They're not title holders of that land, That's how it is all over South Asia. People till the land or they use it for rangeland and pastures. They go back. So the one way of literally seducing them away from those dangerous riverbanks, they will overflow in a normal flood or another type of flood, was that we started giving them the titles to the land, to the new land. Okay, here's other land. Now we're building the houses on it for you. I don't think they're climate proof, but they're supposed to be flood proof. Those are two different things, as you know. And I mean, that's the best one could do in that short. People need to live, they need shelter. The title deeds were given over to the women of the family. So you find the women, that who's the widow or the wife here or whoever, or the lady, the woman who owns this or actually has been tilling the land, and since it's the women who till the land, the men, well, they sit around and sort of make market. So they're recipients of that land, and honestly, I think that they will nurture, conserve, and replenish that soil better than we have been doing for years, because that soil now needs perhaps different crops. It needs climate smart agriculture, still a term. It has not been really scaled up anywhere. So the challenge is that NGOs come in, the MDBs come in, everybody well-meaning wants to plant a flag. They tick their box on small pilot projects. I said, please take them away. You're just ticking your own boxes. You want to scale up something for even at least half a province, do it, otherwise take this away. And they're like, look at her. I'm like, no, we'll do it on our own then. And we will do it on our own. I'm confident that those women and men will find what their land will support. And they're beginning to find it. And it's going to be trial and error, fine. But I don't want little pilot projects, little skate things that are, telling the world this is the Green Pakistan program. I said, are you serious? It's not even 3 districts. How is this the Green Pakistan program? So stuff like that had been going on. The thing to do is make people self-reliant as much as possible, and at the bottom of the social pyramid, because without flattening those social pyramids, we're going to see enhanced poverty. We're going to see more and more a crisis of vulnerability, really. And all crises, conflict, climate, all of them, they impact the vulnerable the most. And in those cohorts, it's the women and children the most. That's just a no-brainer. Whether it's a pandemic or it's conflict or camps created from conflict or climate stress, it's the women and children first that are impacted. And there are stories from the ground. I should have brought my book. So there's all this going on, but I do want to speak very importantly to the world outside Pakistan. Why? Because I don't want to strip ourselves of agencies. This is not a story of victimhood. I believe it's a story of actually taking charge of our lives and seeking our entitlement. Seeking an entitlement is not victimhood. Why I'm saying it is because if we're a fractional emitter, say like the Horn of Africa, the elsewhere that I was speaking about, the elsewhere could be the Maldives, which is sinking in 8 years, right? So let's take our penultimate Blue Lagoon vacations there before that. Yeah, really. And that's what their minister said. And she was remarkably sanguine. I said, what, 8 years? That's now. And she's like, yeah, they're sinking. And they're sinking because of extractive consumption, not in those countries. They're fairly sustainable, by the way. And if you look at Africa, all of it, 4% of global emissions. And that's the fragile ecosystem that goes down first because they're in that front line. And we found, so are we. Then I looked at our emissions. I said, oh my God, less than 1%. So basically, you go all green, you go totally renewable. That heat wave will not come down for us. My solution is to adapt, and adapt. That was a shift in priority immediately. I said, I'm sorry, I'm not listening to anybody. That's what we're going to do first. But because my ministry is really essentially recreated to deal with 26 international treaties, covenants, and such like, we started to do the actual work on the ground too. Honestly, the location of the problem is everywhere, but it is specifically in the G20 countries, which are 85% of the emitters. They emit 85% of all this GHGs. So we went up to the COP27 and said, right, we're doing everything we can. We'll build our shields, but that climate is not changing for the better. It's not. The heat waves will keep coming. The trauma, the carnage will keep coming. This is your responsibility, the 85%. And excuse me, when they say, oh, but there's no money in the system. While Pakistan was flooding, just 6 big energy companies posted profits for $97 billion plus for 1 quarter. That's the quarter, July to September. While we're flooding, this is the profit. And it's also, obviously, these are the big emitters. So, you know, it makes for a powerful a bout of anger, if you don't mind. And anger can be constructive. It is not confrontational in the sense that I don't want to put those across the table, which now, for argument's sake, shall be called the global north, because we were the global south. That's what the world has become at the COP20s now, back in 2 big, huge divides. And the negotiations go on. The negotiations are based on the polluter pays principle, right? Embedded in what you were speaking to me about, the notion of climate justice. Which brings me to the real problem. Okay, I'm saying not, when you say what are the 2 big issues you want to address, okay, the big ticket here is not methane, it's not microplastics, it's not GHG emissions. These are the toxins. The bigger toxins are, 1, inaction that has put us all on a path to complete peril. And 2nd, injustice. Very simple. Cleave right down to that. And while we are looking to not be stripped of agency by seeking solutions on the ground, and there's some spectacular ones we found, I cannot report to this House that the 28th Conference of Parties is coming up in early December in Dubai. And what is the UN report saying? It is saying that we are not anywhere close to keeping 1.5 alive, which was agreed to at Paris. We are now at least, and I was saying this last year, I said, you're going to be at 2.8 or 3 degrees centigrade above that, which means we're still going to feel the burn. So the inaction is actually creating the crisis of climate at levels that are not felt here. The climate is still salubrious. The air is still balmy. But as night follows day, which it still does, I'm telling you that if one ecosystem collapses, another follows. If there is it may take time to reach the colder climates, but if there is a hurricane on the Arabian Sea hovering and hovering, and it's hovering longer than it ever does, it's making its way to Pakistan. We're up, you know, watching it. We have all the stuff that tells us where it's coming, the trajectory. So it's coming straight for the same province that was hit by the flood, right? And we're talking to the Indians and saying, well, it's probably veering to your coastline. Anyway, it finally makes landfall. It rips through that area I'm speaking about, the coastal villages first, completely ripping through them. And because I had learned a little bit, I said, no, I'm sitting here in the control room. I know it's in Sindh, and Sindh is like, why, what are you doing from the control room in Islamabad? I said, I'm telling you to evacuate. You need to evacuate. No, it's fine. Evacuate already. So they did. and that saved lives. That was a lesson learned. The thing made landfall it turned right at midnight and made landfall in India. So we were talking, we're like, it's coming to you, it's coming to us, whatever. We had to talk. But it is essential to understand that these kind of cyclones are rising because the water is warmer. The oceans are getting warmer. They're becoming, and the warmer the ocean is, the longer time a cyclone can be sustained on it. We have never seen a cyclone sit on the Arabian Sea that long. So new records are being established and set here. And we are sitting around not talking to each other. We are quite invested in our nationalisms and our own retreat into our own priorities. But I think even if you're to make a rational choice, if moral purpose is not enough, if all lives don't matter, okay, then make the rational choice. This will come to your doorstep one day, and it is a matter of time, and that time span is being accelerated.
So I think there's a number of points that you make that I think we just stipulate that we absolutely agree. So we're at about 1.1 degrees of warming, 1.1, 1.2 right now compared to pre-industrial periods. And you're absolutely right that it's completely unreasonable to think that we'd be hitting 1.5 degrees, that 2.8 is a plausible projection under current policies. And maybe we might do better than that, but that's going to require substantial effort. The thing to keep in mind, these sound like small numbers, but if we are right now, think about the changes that have gotten so much worse, going from half a degree to 1.1 degrees. If we're going to an additional degree over that, we're going to expect to see much more severe outcomes. I mean, much more severe outcomes in lots of different parts of the world. We'll just stipulate that. I think it's very easy to stipulate that the moral culpability lies with those who have, for the longest period of time, created most of the emissions. And that is absolutely not Pakistan. That is the United States. It's the developed world. So in that context, in the context of both of those, you made some very important contributions at COP27 when you were still Minister of Climate, and you were doing negotiations there in terms of pushing forward the loss and damage fund agreement, which of course is still in process, but that was a major step forward. I wonder if you could say a few things about why you think that that's important, and there's going to be an obvious answer to that question, but then maybe there's a more difficult answer to that question, which is going back to the 1.1 versus 2.8 degrees. It seems like a global priority must be to reduce those developed economy emissions, and that's a top priority too. And how do you see, and given finite amounts of money, how do you see the loss and damage and the mitigation strategies working? This is not a new question, and it's one that you've thought of a lot.
So here's my cavil with that question. I don't think the money is finite. I think the politics is finite. The money is in the market. The market is, you're telling me, is allowed to run away with carnage, is going to make our decisions for us. Will those decisions change about the market when 33 million people are impacted in colder climates? Surely they will. Like rescuing a bank. If the environment was a bank, it would be rescued right now. It would be bailed out. I'm telling you, the money is in the market, and it's in the private sector. I understand that the public money everywhere is understretched. It's really overstretched, and it's reached its limits, and there's donor fatigue, and people don't want to transfer resources to entire blocks of it's fungible. They're looking at it and saying, but why is it going away from fixing my bridge, or look at Brooklyn, it's under a swirling eddy of water. Well, Brooklyn is rich, even though it's Brooklyn. It's New York. It will recover. It has capacity, wealth, and knowledge. The rest of elsewhere does not. So everybody there is triply impacted. And you speaking to me about the loss and damage fund, I completely disagree that there isn't money. It's just political will. I was told at COP27, this is never going to happen. Nobody's going to agree to loss and damage. I said, well, we are not leaving Sharm el-Sheikh until this is done. And we did not. My entire colleagues, everybody had left, but the G77, which is a group of like 150 countries, we were chairing that, and it's a very routine kind of thing. Now Cuba is chairing that. But I just saw it as an opportunity. I said, it's 150 countries. These are the blocks, LDCs, least developed countries, headed by Bangladesh, smart negotiator. India was in the room throughout with us, very quietly, but supporting. Arab countries, everybody, the small island states actually had begun this initiative 30 years ago. This loss and damage fund was initiated and as a process begun by the poor small island states, whose names also we don't remember often, but they are the ones actually in the first front line. Their entire countries are sinking. And now we are telling them, I don't know, I don't want to say it. We're telling them that we'll spend some of the money in relocating your people. That's what the loss and damage fund may become. And should we not be thinking about making sure that stops happening? I know it's not a faucet you can switch off. Greenhouse gases will remain in the atmosphere for years. That's how pernicious this is, even after you switch off your emissions, right? Remarkably, we all agree in a moment of epical adulthood, everybody gets up and says, okay, at the UN, we're doing this. Well, no, there have been moments of, but why should it take world wars to sharpen our minds, to create the United Nations, to create humanitarian treaties, to raise the standard, and then let it fritter away in the 21st century when new challenges arise, like the pandemic? What happened? Everybody retreated into their own nationalisms. And how well did that work? The vaccine was not equally accessible. How well did that work? So the challenges of the 21st century, AI, cyber warfare, whatever you want to call it, obviously climate change, and zoonotic diseases, all of these are entirely borderless. And here we are grasping at the last straws of multilateralisms to fix this. And I honestly see this particular Secretary General as quite remarkable in his messaging, advocacy, and particular leadership of this cause. He was extremely supportive. He flew in when he saw that I'm not leaving. All the other ministers flew in. I said, we are not leaving. The critical mass is all you need. That's politics. I learned that in the Senate. I need that to whip my votes. I said, well, it's not an important, who knows about G7? What's G77? It's numbers. That's what matters. If Africa is here, if so-and-so is here, LDCs are here, everybody's here. I texted everyone, the conference is over, people are packing up. I said, we're not leaving, change your flights. They changed their flights. There were not enough hotel rooms or whatever. I don't know why people were leaving, but whatever. And the hosts were jacking up the prices. And we all stayed, the critical mass stayed. The presidency immediately knows that the conference will go up in flames.
Yeah.
He will do anything to rescue that. Back come the Europeans who are all left. Back everybody comes to the floor, and it's through the night. It's 3 o'clock. We get a call, madam, we're in the room again. Okay. We keep doing this. We kept doing this for 3-4 nights after the conference was over. And early one morning, the plenary session was called. It was done. And I spoke on behalf of the entire G77. We made all sorts of bargains, but they were irrelevant compared to the outcome. The outcome was the bridging of a huge and important trust deficit in the power of multilateralism, in the power of the international community coming together for the sole purpose of addressing climate injustice. The Loss and Damage Fund is an instrument to address climate injustice. And you're right to ask, and there was also a lot of grumbling. I won't say from which countries. You all know and can imagine, well, you know, how's it going to be capitalized? Like everything else gets capitalized, how is it going to be replenished? We'll come to that, but establish it, and then by the next time, you should be able to figure out how that works. Well, I mean, a lot of that has, I think, made its mark. We need to keep applying pressure on the transitional committee that is meeting. That's how the UN system works. It can sap you of momentum, unfortunately. It becomes technocratic, and then that's the best way to do it. You cover everything. It's what lawyers do. You just throw so much paper at people that they back off, and that's what happens. There's so much jargon and so much paper. You're like, oh my God, no. You cut right through it and say, no, this is how we want this capitalized. This is who should be eligible. This is who should not. Already the fight is on who's eligible. They're trying to cut out countries like Pakistan. We're not less developed countries, for whatever reason. And so the less developed countries and the small island states will become eligible for this. And thank you to all our partners, particularly civil society, with whom I'm very much in touch and will be with, are saying, they turn around and said, we will not accept such a fund or an eligibility without countries like Pakistan, and the next is Libya. I mean, you saw what happened there this year. So thousands gone. Well, we're going to sort of build a circle around that. So that's not okay. And those kind of competitions are on. That's fine. That's politics. And you can work that out. But my worry is that it will, if it doesn't get capitalized or somewhat, you know, I don't know, operationalized this year, it'll become a ghost fund, like the adaptation fund, the global goal on adaptation, just waivers. None of us get adaptation money. The pledges are made. They don't match the pipelines. The ambitions are stated. The action is not matching that. So it's not a system that's really working.
Well, it's a risk, and it's, you know, I mean, it's clearly, it's, you know, really inspiring to hear your stories about how that actually transpired to pass the fund or to agree on the fund. But it is, of course, a big risk. I mean, the United States hasn't even fulfilled its original $3 billion pledge to the Green Climate Fund, and in this most recent round of pledges, the United States passed on it, not because the Biden administration didn't want to, but because it realized that it simply, well, Congress is kind of not even operating at the moment, but it realized that Congress wasn't going to be able to allocate the funding. So it's a real political challenge for a lot of these, for a lot of developed countries, in terms of even the Green Climate Fund, which has some benefits because it's can be purchasing technology developed as opposed to the Loss and Damage Fund, which is, you know, has these is going to be more direct benefits to the developing.
They've made it
countries.
Sound radioactive, honestly.
Yeah, it's become a political football here, that's for sure. So we could keep going on for a long time, but actually I want to make sure that the audience has a chance to participate. So I'm open to open, the floor is open to questions. And if you would introduce yourself and say what program you're with here, that would be great. Yeah, we need a mic.
Hi, thank you so much, Senator Rehman, for taking out the time to talk to us and for talking about such an important topic. My name is Usama. I'm a education policy student at Harvard, and over there at the education school, we're actually thinking a lot about how flooding is affecting schooling in Sindh particularly, and how we can support the government of Sindh in creating a policy to adapt the education system for distance learning and things like that. And I'd love to talk to you about that if I get the opportunity. But my question to you right now is about two things. The first is that, as you said, there is some level of agency that we also must take, and responsibility that we must take. So my question is, to what extent are you and your party also working on creating a consensus regarding a climate policy, a sustainable climate policy within Pakistan, or a sustained effort or a way of working regardless of which party is in power right now or in the future? And secondly, I was also curious about learning that in what ways is the climate ministry working to find out about opportunities for growth in terms of green growth as the world global economy moves towards, let's say, sustainable development? How can Pakistan capitalize on those sorts of things? So I'd really love to hear about that. Thank you.
Well, if you're speaking about private financing, that's really not happening right now, because private investments need, they look for de-risking of their capital. You must have heard that term. It's very widely used these days for all sorts of things. But that's the first thing they want. They want their investment secured. They usually even want collateral. And they're looking, sometimes their terms are a little predatory as well. So it's nothing compared to public financing. And honestly, I haven't seen blended or private finance run to the front lines of investing in soil that looks like a blasted Shakespearean heath. They're not running to invest there. It's all about turning a profit, and an assured one. Fair enough. That's how markets work. That's how private investment work. But let there be no confusion on that. I allowed, in fact, encouraged an first investment fund to come in, the Acumen Fund. They brought in $80–90 million for this green growth and many such affiliated programs. They're still looking for investors. So, I mean, I wouldn't be holding out a torch for that level of investment to turn a page or move the needle at scale, because what's needed is internationally and in countries like Pakistan, scale, capital at scale. And obviously, when you talk about the Green Climate Fund, is that what you were asking before? No, you're asking about what? What were you asking? Are they moving towards sustainable development? I can't see that. Well, yeah, carbon capture, just so you know, Sindh is actually running the largest mangrove and carbon sequestration program in the world. It is called the Delta Blue Carbon Project. I actually facilitated it. It was waiting, by the way, for several years for the federal government to sign on. We didn't understand voluntary markets. Voluntary markets are also not perfect. There is no international framework that regulates them, not really. So I've signed on Vera. There's Vera and Gold Standard that certify these carbon credits. So what the mangrove project does, it is regrowing and replenishing one of our largest wetlands. It acts as a buffer against sea flooding, but it's also an ecosystem engineer, if you like, for the coastal areas. And it is the world's largest mangrove replenishment project. It will, over the life cycle, and it's working with private capital because it's a voluntary market project. I allowed it because I think we need to attract the capital. We need the money. It will generate, I don't know, something like 50,000 green jobs. They will, because it's Sindh and PP go first to the women. They're already going to the women. And the life cycle of it is 350,000 hectares. And in the end, it will be, because another one's coming up now. So almost all the mangroves are regrowing. They've broken a world record in replenishment. From 1999 to now, it's 300%. So while the glaciers are melting up there, we're growing these at 300%. and also obviously monetizing them. They are being they're trading in the carbon, and everybody's allowed for a finite time to trade on. I would say it's finite because then you won't have any NDCs left. So the trading should be allowed to all provinces that want to grow, and the condition is that the money goes into replenishing and other such ecosystem replenishment projects and recharge of the basins that we need to recharge. So that's happening. I mean, it's happening at huge scale. It's one of it is the world's largest project. It's called the Indus Delta Blue. It's a UK party. We verified them. We brought in Vera, and Gold Standard is still coming in, but Vera is the largest carbon credit verifier, and they're in the country now. And so we're trading in carbon markets. Yeah. For all those who wanted to hear the good stories, please focus.
Right back there? Yeah.
Aap soni nahi rahe.
My name is Anissa. I recently graduated from Kennedy School. I'm now working here at the Government Performance Lab. My question is mostly about adaptation, and I know that it looks so different based off of the context, whether it's in the plains or in the mountains or urban, rural, residential, agriculture. I'm wondering what you think are the low-hanging fruit that if there was financing or funding, what are some successful examples of adaptation in any of the above contexts that you think could be scaled up quickly, in terms of low-hanging fruit?
So water, I mean, at least for Pakistan, I can't speak to all of Asia, but I think South Asia, by and large, needs to focus on the water agri-nexus. Those are the first priorities as well. They have to be, because we are all depleting our groundwater very fast. The tube wells, the flood irrigation that the entire region grows rice and wheat and cotton on. These are very, very thirsty crops. And we are all very close to water scarcity, which is scary because the entire wheel turns on water, as you know. So there's no time for low-hanging fruits. It is time to focus on the water agri-nexus. We don't want to become a hunger hotspot of the world. I believe that one of the FAO has already put Pakistan as a hunger hotspot, but all of Asia is losing agricultural farmland very fast because of the overheating, and water is entirely related to everything on the ground. So you need it for urban dwellings, you also need it for wastewater recycling, desalination. There are a multiple number of solutions. Most of them are capital intensive. They do need capital outlay and investment. But there are smaller and at-scale solutions that are that should be triggered by the local area, because I insist on it has to be, nothing has to be, has to be fit for purpose, and it can't be the federal government, Islamabad, saying this is what you do. So we've designed our adaptation plan in such a way that everybody is able to, the terrain is so different. What Gilgit needs is very different than, say, what Sindh needs, and Balochistan is absolutely brown now. It used to have magnificent apple orchards, and the junipers are all burnt. So, there are different solutions we've offered for different terrains. It has to be that way. And if there is local ownership, because all adaptation to be successful has to be owned by the communities. It cannot be done top down. You can't have the consultants fly in and then parachute in and tell you what to do. The whole thing just falls apart afterwards. Everybody's made their little piece, got their white big cars, and the money's been skimmed off and very little on the ground to show for. It's best that the locals do it. We have devised 8 priority areas for them. And obviously, urban regeneration is part of that, because we are the largest. I mean, our urban sprawl is huge, and we're urbanizing very fast, faster than any country in South Asia. That's not necessarily a good thing, because it's putting municipal services at huge stretch. Where there's a lot of climate in migration that's totally undocumented. So the cities have a lot of pressure on them. Their waste management and sanitation services are collapsing. The minute there's a climate event or a long monsoon, the cities collapse because their waste management is sinking, their sanitary, their pipes are, the storm drains are clogged. You try to make South Asians move from a storm drain. They're living on it. No, no. The court has to send bulldozers. It's a horrible thing to see. It's what movies are made on, right? So it's not easy. And the urban context requires different interventions. The rural ones entirely different. I mean, since soil, for instance, their one department is putting in solar tube wells. And I'm like, what are you doing? I'm telling the food ministry, having an argument in the cabinet. The prime minister is saying, Sheriji, what's the matter? I thought you would like things to be solarized. I said, no, sir. Solarization is incentivizing complete overuse of groundwater. That those tube wells are never going to stop extracting the water then. So when sometimes we come up with one solution, when we work in silos, this is what happens. This is not a popular argument because you lose elections by turning off the solar tube wells. But, you still have to think of even the medium term. Water scarcity is 2025. It's not even 2030. And it's actually there in some areas. It's already a reality in many areas. So I think there's no question of what the priority is. It's very clearly for me the water agri nexus, and thankfully for once the cabinet agreed.
Please.
Are we going to be here all night, guys?
A little bit longer.
I'm just kidding.
Thank you.
I'm past my slump.
Thank you so much, Ms. Rehman. This was really informative. I'm from Ahmedabad, grew up in Pakistan my whole life, and I'm learning technologies at the Harvard Education School. So something we talk a lot about often is the impact of community education when it comes to climate. Now, I know in Pakistan, we battle the issues of illiteracy, but I think, and I'm very curious about what are efforts on ground to teach communities about how they can save themselves when, for example, floods come in. In Skardu, there's only 30 minutes of electricity because the water level was so low this year. And there are people outside the office of the district commissioner all day long. So what are ways we're teaching our communities to cope up, things that can do that are in their power? And second, I think building off of your argument on not working in silos in Pakistan, I think the coordination with other governments, is so important within the country itself. So I'm very curious what are efforts that are in place in Sindh, thinking about how you can coordinate with the governments of other provinces and at the national level so that we together as a country can stand out of this, that Sindh, KPK, Gilgit, Punjab, and Balochistan are all given an equal weightage in this war against climate change. Thank you very much.
Fantastically tough questions. No, they're very important and they're the heart of many of our challenges. But I think all the provinces, the federating units are fighting their own battles. It's very important to let them, I always insist that let the province say what it wants. And Gilgit, you're from Ahmedabad, but you're from Ahmedabad? Okay. So I don't know why you were mentioning Skardu. Yes, there's low electricity and there's a lot of, right now, the challenge in GB and Skardu is everybody's rushing to those mountains. There are plane loads arriving now, international flights, dumping tourists there. And I'm like, oh my God, there is soot, plastic bottles everywhere. Our fantastic, stunning glaciers are being adventure tourismed out of their ice and snow. And it's no longer pristine. It's really sad to see that. So that's one of the biggest problems I see in GB and Skardu. They are overwhelmed by tourism, and it's not ecotourism. Okay, so that is one of the things that I would worry about. But they have been also one of the most successful programs, again, in the world, in Gilgit, Baltistan, for the glacial lake outburst floods. We have instituted, it's called GLOF 1. We are scaling it up to GLOF 2. That's the one I would have liked to share with the entire third pole region, which is the 3 mountain ranges together, Hindu Kush, Karakoram, and Himalayas. So we have the largest glaciers. We've done it, we started it, we save our lives, but it's the community that does it. Whenever they own anything, any project, that's where it becomes successful. It turns. That's the silver bullet if you're ever looking for any. And you anchor it in their agency, in their language. We send down the trainers. There is a little bit of capital investment and technology that is going to be GLOF 2, and that's coming in with the assistance of UNDP. Super successful early warning, entirely community-based system. So they want the alarms. They have like Sherpas on each cluster of lakes. One is looking like it's going to, maybe go. So they keep the watch, as does some of the technology. There still isn't enough of it, but they are managing that program. They run there's a siren, very, very early 20th century stuff. You wouldn't know about sirens. We grew up with those during wars and blackouts. So that siren runs. It's low cost. It works. Everybody's warned. They run to save their cattle, their livestock, their children, their whatever belongings they can manage. So it's working. And I would suggest that other mountain communities look into that. When I saw the Sikkim lost 14 people yesterday in a GLOF, I was like, oh my God, we can easily share this with them. They've got to ask, I guess. And what was your other question? How everybody can coordinate. Okay, that's like, I have no answer for that. No, of course it's crucial. And everybody coordinates when they're offered the gift of capacity. That's why they listen to you. That's why a province with agency, power, and more money than the center listens to you. When you call them and say, all right, chief secretaries of all of you, get on this, we're consulting, we're building a national adaptation plan, what are your priorities? Keep coming back at least 3-4 different levels, culminating in chief secretary, chief minister, because otherwise it doesn't work. They come back in, the document has their sign off. If they have a forest fire, I'll say, okay, the 3 provinces are burning. 4, except for Sindh, every forest was burning. The mangroves weren't burning. They were all burning one summer, burning wildly. So I said, okay, I had an excellent secretary. I said, Secretary Saab, foreign task force banai, and put them all on Zoom. Don't move them from their provinces. Gilgit once shows up. The nearby ones always come by. And we're asking them, so here are some SOPs, basic stuff for heat waves, run a task wave. I keep saying, okay, they don't. I'll give you an example. Balochistan was on this forest fire thing. And for 14 days, there was a huge forest fire rampaging through Balochistan. I said, run them on Zoom now. Other provinces were stating their needs and saying, okay, KP was saying, we've got to burn here. This looks like, I'm like, I know that looks like arson. So you have to be clear. So we were figuring out what to do. I said, when you need federal support, tell us. It was Balochistan who really needed the federal support and was not even asking. They're not used to this outreach. I said, speak, Secretary Saab, because you have an entire juniper forest, berry pine nut forest being wiped out. It takes 30 years for them to grow this big. A lot of livelihoods are associated with it. 3 firemen have died, 2 or 3 firemen have died. It's a huge thing. So what are we doing about this? And he says, yes, it's terrible. Okay, so how can we help? I have national disaster management in the room. It has obviously more heft than, as much heft as the province, but the province was depleted in its capacity. I said, we're sending in the helis and all that. Next day, I'm so glad I did. They came back and they said, this is beyond us. That fire is beyond control. We're all sitting again on Zoom and like, what do we do now? Okay, let's call Iran and Turkey and ask them they have what is known as Bowser, I call them Bowser planes, okay? Their C-130 is retrofitted to dump water on big fires. So we called up the Foreign Office. This is how the federal government cooperates. We give them the gift of capacity for policies. And we say, okay, here's the national clean air policy. They're like, how is it national? We are the province. We decide. I said, okay, don't take it. You don't want it? Don't take it. You have one? No. Okay, then. So they accept it because they're part of it. They're consulted the whole year. It takes 1 year to make anything because everyone's doing rounds and rounds and rounds. It's worth it because they've got to implement the stuff. And then they have ownership. On other stuff, like we call the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, it's entirely federal. We're like, get a Bowser plane from Iran. It was with us in 8 hours. And it was made operational. And the fire went down, but also the rain came at the same time. Murphy's Law. Just that when we're flying the Bowser, the rain comes down. Whatever. But I'm saying that's how it works. It's very hit or miss in many of these things. These fires become uncontrollable. Look at the local solutions that Turkey and Iran have. Because they're nearby, Iran shares a similar topography to Balochistan, very similar. So we thought of that. Oh my God, 1,000 questions. Veena, you have no right to ask. You will speak to me later.
No, but it's a question I would like to ask.
Whatever.
But if you're really exhausted, then you can.
Of course I'm jet lagging.
Satya, did you have a question?
No, please let Gina.
Oh, so Gina, okay, please. Okay. Yes, please. Yeah.
Yeah, hi. Thank you, Sherry. I'm so sorry. But I think that something you said was so important. And I would like you to talk about that a little bit more. You mentioned that about the Sikkim Glove, and you mentioned that, the Nepal and India, and how in the G77, India was there quietly supporting. And what we are seeing, like you said, you talked about transboundary rivers. Obviously, environment is transboundary. There's no boundaries. Of course, this goes without saying. But the politics in the region in South Asia right now are so vicious that there is no dialogue. And you talked about this wonderful answer you gave about, and how you've been sharing how this coordination and how you've been getting people to own the thing and to work. So how can we start building such relationships in the region? Because without that, we have to, right? How can we do it when there's no dialogue?
So this is politics. It's
Yes.
Geopolitics. It's reared its head in Europe, right? Which was the model of unity and regional success. Brexit happened. And then many other things happened. And now you have the Ukraine war and no Black Sea grain deal even. So how rational is that? The world is not rational. Before I start saying other things I don't want to, I'm just going to say you are making an appeal to the rational, which is so 20th century. Sorry, I'm hiding behind irony. But no, what can you say? It's ridiculous. No, there are many options, but the men running those countries are not thinking about those options. No, what can people here do? I'm sorry if the two countries are saying there's a precondition to every conversation. But we went with them in the SCO. I did the climate change SCO with them. India was chairing. I said, we're doing this. It's climate change, we're doing this. It's all online anyway, there's no physical, we're doing this. And then the foreign minister also went to Goa for the SCO. So the idea is not to be irrational. But geopolitics isn't going anywhere. On climate change, when you say there has to be talks, there are only talks when there is a crisis in the room. When there's an avalanche in Kashmir, both the prime ministers had to talk. The avalanche was like not interested in any border. So that's what goes on, but no, you're imagining that an appeal to rationality is a way out. It is the only way out. It is the obvious way out. But like I said, the men running these countries are not thinking about it. A lot of men running many countries are not thinking about it.
Please.
Thank you, Senator, for this talk. I'm going to give you a break. This is more for the Provost. So in 2018, Bill Nordhaus won the Nobel Prize for climate change, and he said in his presentation that the climate, for climate change to be cost, for the cost to make sense, for the benefit for countries working for climate change, it has to increase by 4 degrees. And here you guys are talking about the catastrophic effects of temperatures rising by 1.5 to 2.8. And Senator had very compelling testimony of like the havocs of climate change. And we also have things like the very technocratic solution by the Biden administration, which is the economic and climate screening tool that they use to talk about the cumulative effects of climate change and racial justice and all of that. And that's mean testing. And we all know we're sitting in a room full of policymakers that mean testing doesn't really work for populations that are impacted by it. How do you suppose that the systems, the economics, the market capital that has perpetuated this uninhibited economic growth is going to be the one to present us with solutions at all?
That's a bitch of a question.
Yeah, that's a big question. You know what? I'm going to give a fairly succinct answer because this is I would love to give a very long answer, but I'm not going to because I want to make sure there's a chance for the final question for the senator. I think that I'm going to give both an optimistic spin and a challenge. So the optimistic spin is that I think we've moved beyond thinking about the type of cost-benefit analysis that led to, say, Bill Nordhaus making the statement that he did, and that for better or for worse, and I think it's for better, we have generally adopted a position where we have to get to net zero emissions by a certain date, 2050, let's say, for the United States. There are important actions that even our political system has been taking to really make good progress towards that. The Inflation Reduction Act is an obvious case. That said, there's a ton of work to do. A lot of that work has to do with I think really granular, detailed working within specific sectoral areas to make it happen. Can we make it happen? Do we need to change our entire economic system to deal with climate change? I don't think we have time to make that case. I think we need to work with what we have and to get to net zero, and there's ways to do that. It's going to require political will. We've got a lot of technological tailwinds. We have much more work to do than we've already done, but I think that is it's a feasible task, but one that requires everybody in this room and everybody in this university using all their skills as best they can. Let me get one more question for the senator, please, Sachin. Just Mike, and please introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm Sachin Balsari. I'm a faculty here at the medical school. Just building off what you said, Senator Rehman, just 90 years ago, it was sort of unthinkable that the economic arrangements in South Asia then could be changed, and that people would be willing to pay more to buy hand-spun cotton on the local market when there was much better quality cotton available from the shops. As we hurtle towards this late-stage capitalism in South Asia as well, is there any room for a South Asian idiom to talk about these economic arrangements? 90 years is a very, very short time in the history of one of the oldest civilizations on the planet. There are other economic arrangements that South Asia has known for a long time. Do you feel like there is room for political or social discourse that would examine other arrangements?
Do I have a special lens on South Asia? I do actually. Actually, no, not an insider. I've been one of the last few people who want to believe in the idea of South Asia. I don't think South Asia imagines itself as South Asia anymore. Are you aware of that? So I'm very happy to be at a center that continues to invest in that. It's a dream now. It's a dream. It needn't have been. But vestiges of that still sort of hang on. Somebody asked me, how can you just go into Delhi? I said, I really can't, not because of the visas, but we do have SARC visas for parliamentarians. Entry is, you don't need visas to go into each other's countries. Did you know that? So we do that sometimes. But I don't think that it's going to originate out of politicians that use foreign policy or the country next door to activate their base again and again and again. And what it's done is it's in the last 15 to 20 years, and I'm going to be speaking very plainly now, there have been obviously two iterations of the BJP, the swing to the far right. The first BJP, and Veena would know this, also prohibited Pakistanis from, not prohibited, they didn't welcome Pakistan, but this is 2000 and something, right? 2003 or 4. I remember saying, well, no, I'm taking a parliamentary delegation across the Wagah border. My foreign office said, please don't do it. They're not going to welcome you. I said, well, I have an invitation from the Lok Sabha, the Rajya Sabha, Nirmala Deshpande, who was a force of nature. Just she herself could make stuff happen. She was a Gandhiist. And anyway, so they said, you're not to come. We got on the train. I took up 5 or 6 parliamentarians. We got on the train all the way. There were black flags at every station. Pakistanis, go home. I've never seen such xenophobia. But anyway, we went in and before that, by the way, yes, I was at the Wagah border and our rangers were talking to the Indian rangers or whatever they're called. And I said, what is the Indian army doing in such big numbers? There's only 5 of you. Look at that phalanx. It's height of, I remember it was very hot. It was May. And I said, it's 12 o'clock. I said, yes, Sikhs ko kya suja hai? It's 12 o'clock. And they said, they came back and they said, yeah. And it was kind of misty because it's, what the mirage. Anyway, when we got close, it was a welcome party. It wasn't the Indian army. It was everybody who's anybody in the media in India. We went to Amritsar, and I still resent the picture they put of me on all the front pages of Indian newspapers with my mouth open, being fed a laddu, and I resent it. But there was this strange schizophrenia, this obsessive interest, also, and then this real chauvinistic, exclusive hatred. So anyway, we got there and we had our meetings lined up and we went ahead with the normal. I was the PEP and there was the Congress party, and we had a system or tradition of speaking to each other, whatever happens. So those were genteel times, I suppose. And we did that. And a couple of other, obviously the left parties all wanted to talk. Then I had women's groups, people that I knew and all that. So there were lots of relationships and those were carrying on. And so we got a call from the BJP that we'd like to meet with you. You're on every goddamn newspaper now. So we went across to Mr. Vajpayee. It really made a huge difference. Then Mr. Advani. And by that winter, I recall, we invited the BJP, everybody back, and 85 BJP parliamentarians standing at Islamabad airport in the night, and we didn't know what to do with them. I said, what, you were 8 people, and now it's 85. So the surge of interest was so high, and the relationships made at that point carried on. It wasn't just the Nehruvian politicians. They would, in any case, meet and talk and bring at least a patina of civility to often a very tense and fraught and otherized argument. But the BJP 1.0 was doing was it was changing in front of us, and it was beginning to invest in the idea or reinvest in the idea of South Asia. But 2.0 is not a story I need to repeat to you. You know what it is. It's another India. And when I last spoke to a group of Indians, I said, you guys need to decide and tell me which India I'm talking to. Because they often say that to us, that you also need to decide. And it's not a tit for tat, but we need to be very clear on going forward that we can't be having proxy conversations that are that lead nowhere, because opportunities are drying up, just like our water basins, and we're not using them very well.
Well, I'm afraid that we're going to need to end on that rather challenging note. But thank you very much for spending so much time with us and with sharing your thoughts. It's been very inspiring, and we realize that there's a lot of work ahead for all of us. Hitesh, do you want to say any final words?
Yes, I just wanted to say, first of all, thank you, both of you, for an engaging discussion. Thank you. I also wanted to just thank all of you for coming. I just, you said the Mittal Institute still believes in South Asia, and I'm just thinking, we've had a year of events connected to Pakistan, a Pakistan conference, but we began a year ago with marking the 75th anniversary of independence with Amartya Sen and Babar Ali Saab and Ali Sethi singing of the unpartitioned heart, as he called it. And that's where we are here, still with the unpartitioned heart. I just want to thank all of you. I just want to take a second to acknowledge that several of Harvard's most senior faculty who are connected to South Asia and climate change are here. I'm just seeing Jennifer Leaning, Richard Cash, Michael McElroy, whom I've known since I was a graduate student in the 90s, and he was already a legend for his work on climate back then. Asim Khwaja, Sachit Balsari, who's a younger scholar. If I'm leaving it, oh, there's Rahul Mehrotra. And I also want to say, Shaheen Pirzada Sahab, it's always a delight to have you here. So thank you all for joining us. Thank you both, and we'll conclude the evening.